The long journey is almost over. So 60 days are at an end, and here we are. 116 backers. We are $250 short of the first stretch goal. And this is it. This is the end of the Noirlem campaign. I don't have enough time to thank all of the people that helped make this what it was, whether it's, Michael Bancroft, Shay, heck, Rob inadvertently helped me just yesterday by putting up that video about how to launch, how to crowdfund comics. Wise guys, I could just go on. And then, most importantly, the backers. We got 116 backers at the moment, which is a few more than B-Rose, so I'd like to keep it that way if possible. Speak of the devil, and he should appear. What's up, B-Rose? Yeah, it's been a wild journey. I'm so gracious for the people who supported me, whether it was having me on the stream, backing the campaign, helping me to get the word out. It's because of all of you all that this was able to sort of come into fruition. We got about 6 hours left, despite what it says there. Really like to get that first stretch goal out. I'll be talking about what that will unlock. But for the time being, if you haven't seen it, let's do just a little quick recap. If you're not familiar, if you're watching this on a replay, when it may or may not be in demand. This is Noirlem. It is a 90-page noir detective thriller set in 1920s Harlem. It's a murder mystery. It is the origin story of two heroes. So there is basically a dual story going on because you have the mystery and then you have the character stuff kind of layered over top of that. So they have to, work together like chocolate and peanut butter. But it is a gorgeous book. I love this watercolor style, which if you've ever seen paintings from the Harlem Renaissance, it's very evocative of that kind of blue collar sensibility. If you want to jump on board, we have just the book here. It's $25 for 90 pages. That is a deal and a half. You will not find a better deal than that in crowdfunding. And okay, so speaking of that, I'm going to kind of veer off. We got Mo in the chat. Hail, Mo. I've been thinking about it because there's something people have been talking a lot about lately is like the price of CG books, right? Of crowdfunded books, of indie books, and how like you're paying a little bit more than what you see in the mainstream. And I was trying to think of what would be analogous to that. And as much as I hate to admit it, the best analogy I could think of is craft beer. Now, hear me out. Craft beer is made, 90% of the people that make craft beer are a-holes. But that's kind of what you're getting here. You're getting small batch, or you know what? Let's go with bourbon. Small batch bourbon done by people who care infinitely more about what they're making than the mainstream. Okay. And except the only difference is at the end of the process, you have a book that you can own forever instead of something that you just peed into the toilet. You see what I mean? So don't start on book prices with B Rose in the chat. The price of his book was his first broken. He's a broken promise machine. We got Dean. Hail, Dean. Let's call it crack beer. Let's do it. Let's fucking do it. So for $15, you can grab a digital. Got no shame for the digital lovers out there. Actually, I think that might be why my funding is a little bit lower than most, because that digital. But I mean, got to take care of the robots. $30, you got the digital library. You can get everything I've ever published. Free shipping on that PDF. Over 200 pages for $30. Right here, we got the Zippo. Get yourself a book in a nice golden Zippo. This is going away at the end of the night. If I have any leftover Zippos, I'm just going to throw those into like random people are either going to get an extra Zippo or a Zippo they didn't order. So make sure you grab that while you can. We got the Noirlem How to Die physical bundle. You're going to get both variants of How to Die and a copy of Noirlem for 40 square. We got the double pack here. You want to save on some shipping for your boy. Get him a copy because he wants it too. We got the retailer bundle. We got the Spencer's pack right here. You're going to get 5. You're going to get a Zippo. You're not going to get any crack pipes with this, but you are going to get a Zippo. And this one here, I have one left. So I have done first edition bundles on all my campaigns. I've reached the end of the line. This is the very last of the Eudaimonia first editions until I do a reprint or until I, do the campaign for Eudaimonia number 3. And maybe I was thinking about doing like a hardcover for that. So this is it. You want that first edition, get it before it's gone because there's only one left here. So we need to get to 5K to unlock this. So this is the splash art for chapter 2. If we get to 5K, I'm going to do, because I basically steal everything I get, every idea I have from Bancroft. I saw those prints in the Lucent. I thought they looked really nice. I hit him up, asked him how he got them. So at 5K, everybody is going to get a nice little poster print of this cover here. And it's kind of fitting because all of the splash art is supposed to look like an old noir movie poster. Mo Big says the Zippo will still come in handy. You just need to supply your own pipe and spoon. I don't know. See, I think you need one of those like jet lighters that they had back in the day that you only see at bodegas now. Like those specific crack lighters. I don't think the Zippo is going to be the one for that. I don't know. Yeah, so we got that for a little bit longer. So look at the screen right now. If that's your jam right there, then this book is going to be for you. At this point in time, I wish I had added 7 to that picture, because 7, the more I've thought about it, that's the closest to what this is. 7 is a story about a homicidal maniac. It's not as gory as 7. And 2 guys, one's white, one's black. One of them is like a little bit smarter than the rookie. So they have that kind of dynamic. So this in 7 right here. You want some Sin City, you want some LA Noir, you want some Gotham Noir. Hit that button, get that for $25. This is where we're at as far as the progress. Letters should be coming in to get caught up to the colors right here. And that finishing line is in sight. This is where we're at here with the colors. So we're getting there, and the book is going to be done soon. And once we get this printed and shipped out, then it's on to the next project with a nice big titty lady for How to Die number 2. And so, yeah, we're almost there. We need to get to that 5K, and we are going to get that unlocked. Is this going in demand? Yes, but the Zippo lighter is going away. So no Zippos after tonight. So it's your last chance to get your crack lighter. B-Rose boobs, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, I know I've disappointed Shay because I've been on her show 3 times now, and I've never really given her a good character to cosplay. So because you have to pay insane shipping rates. Yeah, pretty much. Dean's fiending for that cash because he's going broke back in projects. Let me stop this. So what I was planning on doing is a kind of deep dive into the entire first chapter of the book. So if you want to see what the book is all about, if you want to see what the writing is all about, that might sound weird to some people that I'm just kind of giving it away, but I spent a lot of care kind of constructing this mystery, right? And so if you think of storytelling as having like a 3-act structure, the first act is really where you're just setting up all of the conflict in the second and third act. So because I spend so much time kind of constructing the story, I know that I can show you the first chapter and it's still only going to be a taste. It's going to be a taste of what's to come. It's going to set up the action that comes down the road. It's going to set up character dynamics and things like that. So, I don't like that at all. My giant mountain man beard. Gross. Do 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 do. So yeah, before we get into it, I got to tell the story though. There's this crazy woman that lives in my apartment building, and she may have tried to kill somebody's dog. Like we found poisoned meat outside of my neighbor's door. Like there was just poison. Like it was like lunch meat mixed with rat poison outside of her apartment. And like we've emailed the management company, and they're just like, it's fine. Well, it's fine. So today after work, I got to go outside and pop a smoke. And I just see a piece of paper on the ground in the hallway, and it says, "You're going to die," smiley face. And so that's what I have going on. All right. Moses Crackpack understands the concept of the first hit being free. No need to explain. Absolutely. But yeah, so let's get into it. Hang on. It's a pretty weird title, right? Salted Tomatoes. This is the opening of the book. It's the first splash art. No shit, lady. Everyone's going to die. Salted Tomatoes just kind of sets the mood. It's a rainy night. There's a police officer standing out front. But yeah, let's get into some story. So this is a Harlem rent party. Okay, if you happen to not know, back then, you didn't have the money to pay the rent. Hail Aldous. Okay. So if you didn't have the money to pay the rent, right, you get a band to come in, you get a pot with some rice and beans or whatever on the stove, and you invite people over, right? And they pay a cover, and you get the rent paid. So this is really like the book just drops right in on a Harlem rent party. I'm hoping you guys can read the text. But we see Coleman coming down the hallway outside, and the woman whose apartment it is, she says, "Coleman, honey, come on in for a spell. It's burning up." And Coleman says, "Oh, I know it. The way Lionel's on that snare, I'd say the missus made the coffee strong today." And he says, "But tonight I have a date with the page. Papers to grade and more to read. I'll be sure to make the next one." And then he goes in the apartment and starts reading. Every piece of dialogue is designed to just kind of reinforce either the character or the situation. So right here, you have a kind of sense of community. The woman invites him in. They know each other already. Coleman knows enough about them to be able to infer information about her and the drummer just from hearing it. Like, oh, the missus must have made the coffee too hot today. But he's committed. He's a learner. He's got to go back to his apartment. He's got to read. He's got to grade some papers. And so it's, the very first page, the very first dialogue is just kind of setting up information about the character, whether you realize it or not. The only other thing I'll add is this woman's dress here might look a little bit out of the time period, but if you think about poor neighborhoods, it makes a little bit of sense. They would be wearing fashion that would be a little bit out of style. Was there such thing as a radio minstrel shows? Yes, there was. And actually, I think one of the most popular minstrel radio show characters was black, and so that created a whole other thing. It was a black guy acting like a black guy imitating a white guy imitating a black guy. So if you're confused by that, it's understandable. So we go on to the next page. We see that the drummer needs to just step away for a bit. He has the band, just keep playing, guys. Coleman's still in his apartment reading. In the third panel, we see the woman whose apartment it is, checking on what's going on in the bathroom. And in the fourth panel, you can see Coleman starts to sense that something's a little bit off. And so she opens up the door, and we got a dead drummer sitting on the toilet, and she screams, and Coleman's jumping out of his chair. Also, I missed it, but hail 24 eyes. Always good to see you. So we got a dead drummer on the crapper, okay? So we cut to outside. We have the police arriving. We have Coleman smoking a cigarette. And we have the grieving widow here in the arms of a friend. The two police officers here just kind of chit-chatting or whatever. And Coleman is just kind of surveying the scene, watching the gears turn in their head a little bit. And so he just walks right up to them and he says, "You can forget heroin, officers. That is, if that's what you were thinking. That is, if you were thinking." And yeah, so Coleman's basically just saying, there's a little bit more going on here than you might realize. Oh, hell, Kimasabi. Always great to see you. So yeah, Coleman's basically saying there's more going on here than you think. And the police officers are the police officers in America in the 1920s, 1930s. The younger one here, this is the introduction to Jay Baldwin. And he starts to say, "Sir, I think," and then his partner, who's obviously the older police detective, maybe the old school police detective, he says, "A Negro with a needle dead on the john. Get in the car, Officer Baldwin." And that's that. The police leave. Coleman watches him. Apparently he wants to smoke another cigarette. And the officer is kind of just watching Coleman through his rearview mirror. All right, it's the next morning. So it's the next morning, and this is kind of what I did is I had this script reviewed by some people, and one of the edits that I got back is I need more character stuff in here. I need to show more of Coleman, just who he is before we see Coleman the detective. We need to meet Coleman the person. So this is just kind of the start of his day. He wakes up, he makes some tea. He takes the bus to the high school, and he has this conversation. There's a woman at the desk, and she says, "Nothing today, Mr. Carmichael." And he's like, "Cheryl." And he says, "All these teachers and not one blotto," meaning he's looking for substitute work. He wants to, substitute teach a class today, but there's nothing available. She says, "Not today, Mr. Carmichael." And so he's just kind of standing there, and you can see in the last panel, another teacher is kind of walking in, and he coughs. And so he grabs the teacher and he's like, whoa, you feeling okay? You don't look so good. And the teacher says, "It's just a cough." And Coleman says, "Oh, I don't know. Why don't you open up and say, ah?" And he does. And then Coleman says, "Well, your glands are awfully swollen. I'd just do if I was you." And the teacher says, "But I have." And he says, "Arithmetic, grade 10, got you covered." And he sends him on his way. And so Coleman just kind of finagles his way into a teaching job for the day. And so then we see Coleman, teaching. He goes to the front desk. He gets his paycheck. He gets on another bus, and we see him going to a university. It's on a university campus. And he just kind of walks in like he's supposed to be there. And he takes a seat in the classroom and just kind of sits down and tries to be as inconspicuous as he can. It's not shown, but this would be Columbia University, which is one of the first integrated universities in the country. So it wouldn't be that abnormal to have a black student there. We see him sneak out. He takes the bus and he comes back home. And this is just his day. He's had a full day. He's gone out. He's managed to hustle and get himself a job, teaching for the day. He snuck into a class and just kind of, was able to kind of almost like, I don't want to say, it's like he's hustling for knowledge. He wants to know whatever he can find and get some more knowledge. And now he's home and he's tired and it looks like his day is over. But then these three kids run up and they go, "Hi, Mr. Carmichael." And their mother is like, "Don't run up on the man like some wild dogs. Sorry, Coleman." Because his day isn't done. Now he has to teach. He has to tutor. He's a tutor for children in the building. And so he turns and he says, "Sounds like some eager minds ready to work. Ain't that right, boys?" And the boys are like, "Ah." And he tells them to run along. And so now we cut to, this is Coleman's apartment. He's teaching the kids. And now we see Officer Jay Baldwin come out of nowhere, basically. The door is open. So Jay Baldwin comes back in and Coleman sees him and he says, "D'accord, tout le monde sauter," which is French for everybody get out. And next panel, we have Coleman says, "And Claude, so help me, if you don't have book 2 finished by tomorrow, you'll be left behind, son." And so he leaves, the children leave, and Detective Baldwin comes in and he says, "Book 2, Corinthians?" Like kind of assuming that he must be doing some kind of Bible study class. But Coleman says, "No, the Iliad. And I didn't say you could walk in either." And Detective Baldwin says, "But your door was open." And Coleman said, "My door is open to inquiring minds, and you are a police officer. As far as I can tell, those are mutually exclusive." So there's a lot of animosity between black communities in New York and police officers in this day. There were Harlem riots in the 20s and again in the 30s. So there's a lot of tension between those two. It's not just something that happened today. Thank you, Kimasabi. So Detective Baldwin says, "Well, then please accept my apologies for the intrusion. I only came to tell you that you were right. What you said last night, but I will leave you to your work." So Detective Baldwin is just like, "Okay, I'm not wanted here. I won't be here. I'll leave you to what you're doing." But then Coleman stops him as he's leaving. And he says, "Wait, go on." And Detective Baldwin says, "I don't know. This is private information and you're not family, are you?" And then Coleman relents and holds the door open for him. And he says, "Had the syringe tested, it was clean as a whistle. My question is, how did you know?" And Coleman says, "Lionel Williams wouldn't touch a needle if his life depended on it. Simple as that. But you're asking the wrong question, which is, how did I know it needed to be said? How did I know that you needed to hear it?" And Detective Baldwin says, "You're forgetting what did happen in that bathroom." And Coleman says, "Oh, that part's simple." And so we cut to a flashback of the gentleman in the bathroom with Coleman's narration. And he says, "Lionel was cooking. He'd gone and tuned that snare of his with that gut wire for that fat, wet roll. Now, our host, Mrs. Hurston, is a nurse, meaning she probably had some of her work home in case of emergency. Poor Lionel had no idea he was so close to his greatest fear, much less that he was conjuring it." And then we can see that he was just kind of like doing a drum beat on his legs because he was all, jazzed up. He's a drummer. But what we end up inadvertently doing is causing the medicine cabinet to open and the needle to come out and just go right into his thigh. And since he was so afraid of needles, his only reaction was just smack his hand down on it. Air embolism. Now, just as a sidebar, air embolisms are not nearly as it's not like in the movies where you see somebody just kind of inject a little bit of air and then somebody dies like almost immediately. It requires a little bit more air, and it has to be in a vein that's going to the brain, right? So if you did it to a vein that's going to the heart, I don't think that would kill you. But if it's going to the brain, then it would kill you. So that's what happened in this case, because the vein in that leg goes to the brain. So basically, he accidentally killed himself with an air embolism to the brain. So Detective Baldwin says, air embolism. Oh, no, I had it backwards. It is to the heart because it says heart right there. So I'm wrong. Forget everything I just said. Well, most of what I just said. Straight to the heart and dead before the music stops. And Detective Baldwin says, well, that's a relief. And Coleman says, I fail to see it, officer. A kind, hardworking member of my community died on the toilet in a tragic accident. And Detective Baldwin says, I'm sorry. What I mean to say is there isn't a murderer I need to go looking for. And Coleman says, well, I'm happy you have closure. Will the New York police share in that sentiment? Or will they continue believing that Mr. Lionel Williams of Harlem died of a heroin overdose while taking a shit? And Coleman says, I'm sorry if there's something I could do. So basically what this is setting up is the fact that Detective Baldwin is a rookie, right? He does not have a lot of power within the hierarchy of the New York Police Department. He's just a rookie homicide detective. And so Coleman says, you can go tell the grieving Mrs. Williams the truth and apologize for your institutional impotency that says her deceased husband is a junkie. And then we have this line here. This is probably one of my favorite exchanges from the book. Coleman says, whom do you serve, officer? And Detective Baldwin starts to say, I serve the people of, and then Coleman cuts him off. He says, no, sir. You serve the truth, for the truth is all our masters. Now go serve. So the original title for the chapter was, or actually the original title for the book was Truth Be Our Masters, but I ended up changing it I wanted to have a title that evoked like a very common sentiment that the story would then give more meaning to, so that when you looked at the title again, you would see it a little bit differently. It's refreshing to see a Baldwin who doesn't. Exactly. Mo with the comment of the night. And so the previous page had a lot of, it was a conversation. So it's, dialogue heavy. The next page is the complete opposite. You're just getting a sort of montage of Detective Baldwin. He goes upstairs. He goes to check out the apartment, the scene of the crime, and he sees that it's exactly the way Coleman had described it. There's a medicine cabinet. There's a needle missing from a case. And then he goes upstairs and he talks to the widow, and then he leaves. There's no dialogue to be seen here. It's just him doing the thing that Coleman asked him to do. I know it was asked earlier, but is this going in demand? It is, but the Zippos are not. This is the only night for Zippos. Also, hail Shadowpunk. Is this one artist or penciler, inker, art, or colorist? The interiors are by a guy named Roel Roque, and the colors are by a woman named Miriam Yasser. And I think they do lovely work together. I really am happy with how the art of the book came out. So almost like you would see in like a TV mystery, we have the close of that scene and we cut to the dock at night. It was in the trailer. We have a woman walking along a pier. Kind of looks like gold Carmen Sandiego. And she sees this figure standing with a light behind him to obscure his face. And he says, aren't you a lovely thing? And she says, why, thank you. And then he just shoots her. There's nothing more to it than that. We've just been shown the first glimpse of the Hudson River killer. And so now we cut to the next morning and the police are investigating. We have Detective Baldwin saying Lorraine Wheatley, who the name Lorraine Wheatley is a reference to, I think it was the first published African American writer. It was a woman named Lorraine Wheatley, and it was her recounting of slavery, basically. But it's disputed whether or not she actually wrote it. It's believed that it was actually written by anti-abolitionists. So I just included, it's just a reference anyway. Lorraine Wheatley, single gunshot to the chest, finished a shift at Zuli's Diner on Broadway just after 9. According to a coworker, she liked to take walks near the water after work before catching the bus home on West 147th. So again, this is kind of showing that like Baldwin is just that nose to the grindstone, kind of detective. He wants to get all of the facts, all of the details. And the older detective, that kind of old school way, he says, shouldn't have been out here. And he says, sir, and he says, a woman like that alone on a pier at night, who needs looking for trouble with companies such as them? And he just points to some random guys in a boat, right? Like dock workers are these villains, like just for no reason. And Detective Baldwin says, sir, I think, and he says, look, whoever did this is 3 ports away by now. Get whatever statements you can, but don't get your hopes up. They're all thick as thieves anyway. And at this point, Baldwin's kind of had enough. He lets it fly a little bit. He says, fine detective work as always, sir. And the older detective says, something you wish to say, Officer Baldwin? And he says, no, sir. I think you've about said it all. And so this older detective, which we learn is Detective Givens here, is just like the kind of cop that, like, he's old school. He runs on, instinct and feel, and he thinks he can just walk into any situation and just know exactly what's going on. Thank you, Shadowpunk. So we cut back to the police station, and Detective Givens is just ripping into Detective Baldwin. And he says, I told Sarge you weren't ready, and here you are, 3 weeks in, questioning 20 years of expertise. And Detective Baldwin says, oh, is that what that is? Show up with the answers that align perfectly with doing as little work as possible? I'm sorry, Detective, I must have confused that with not giving a damn. And Detective Givens says, careful, Officer Baldwin. Need I remind you that you haven't gotten that gold badge just yet? And Detective Baldwin says, need I remind you, Detective Givens, that someone's wife died on that pier last night, and that family deserves more than your first impressions. And at this point, we can see that Coleman has just kind of showed up out of nowhere and is just walking into the room, which is really weird and odd. And Detective Givens goes, you may have been a live wire in burglary division, but you, and then he turns around and he sees Coleman just kind of standing there in his office. No real rhyme or reason. And Detective Givens like, who the hell are you? And Coleman says, so despite seeing him, Detective Givens doesn't remember this guy from last night, right? And so Detective Baldwin just kind of grabs him by the arm and just pulls him away, saying, he's one of my finks from burglary. Come on. And so he pulls Coleman out of Detective Givens' office. And Coleman says, fine speech back there, officer. Only caught the tail end, but it was full of spit. And Detective Baldwin says, well, I may have just torched my career. And Coleman says, oh, damn, a career. And Detective Baldwin says, was there something I can help you with? And Coleman says, no, sir. I just wanted to say thank you. He says, thank you? He says, so basically Coleman learned that Detective Baldwin did what he asked. He went and told the widow the truth. And he says, I spoke to Mrs. Williams. She told me that couldn't have been an easy conversation. You did the right thing when it was hard, and nobody would have made you. So I wanted to say thank you, and I am sorry for my rudeness. It is a reflection of patterns shown toward my community. I hope you understand. So Coleman is basically just saying, like, yeah, man, you're different. Like, you're different than the other police officers I know because you do what is right, regardless of whether or not somebody makes you. You're only interested in doing what is right. And so Detective Baldwin says, of course. Coleman goes to leave. He says, well, I'll leave you to your work, which is, again, kind of repeating the dialogue from earlier. And he says, good day, Officer Baldwin. And he leaves. Now, this is it right here. This is the biggest moment in the story up until now. Detective Baldwin sees these files on his desk, right? He has these unsolved mysteries. And he's just met somebody who obviously recognizes what it means to do good and is able to piece together information without being present at the situation. And so he's looking at these files, and Coleman is walking out, and he grabs his coat and he runs out after him. And he says, how did you find me, Coleman Carmichael? There's a lot of precincts in Manhattan. And Coleman says, how did you find me, Jay Baldwin? There's a lot of black folks in Harlem. And Detective Baldwin says, well, I'm a detective. And he says, well, then so am I. Meaning, well, okay, by your logic, if you could find me because you're a detective, I found you. So I must be a detective too. And Detective Baldwin says, well, it's time for us detectives to grab lunch. You hungry? Hungry? Yeah, hungry. You want a sandwich? My treat. He says, your treat? Yeah, my treat. You picking the joint? Yeah, I'm picking the joint. No. I'll pay my own way, and I'm picking the joint. Come on. Now, that little bit of just kind of banter and back and forth is kind of important here because, it'll explain it here, but Detective Baldwin is kind of looking around like it's a place he's never been before. And he says, is this place any good? And Coleman says, could be. Pinkerton's is the only B&T I knew that was close. He says, B&T, a black and tan means no one's coming out the back with a large knife to throw my black ass out. So B&T is, a black and tan is kind of slang for a lot of different things, under a lot of different contexts. But in this context, a B&T is a restaurant in separate but equal times that would serve black people. So a B&T was a place that a black person could go to eat. Like basically a restaurant they could go get a meal without worried about being harassed. And it was something that kind of spread by word of mouth. You just had to know, what neighborhood am I in? Where can I go? And all that. Let's see here. Coleman says, hey, sweetie, I'll have the Welsh rabbit and a fruit salad and a tea. Thank you. And Detective Baldwin's like, club and a coffee, thanks. Coleman says, are you afraid to be seen with me? And Detective Baldwin says, not exactly. He says, then what? I'm afraid to be seen with you and these. And he passes over the folders on the unsolved murders. And Coleman takes one look at it and he's like, what the hell are you showing me this for? And Detective Baldwin says, I told you I was nervous. And he says, that's not what I mean. I'm not family. I shouldn't just... And Detective Baldwin says, relax. Thanks to the rats, which refers to people who leak information to the press. Thanks to the rats, this will be in all the papers tomorrow, same as all the others. And Coleman says, and damn them for that. That don't make this right, Baldwin. And then he kind of thinks about it and he's like, wait, what do you mean others? And Detective Baldwin says, well, you see 4 files there, don't you? Go on. And okay, again, this is just another line that I'm particularly proud of. Detective Baldwin says, you ever get the feeling that there's something more than what's in front of your eyes? Something so obvious, but only you can see it? Coleman says, every damn day. All right. It's just kind of a reference to like, if you're black, right, and you're experiencing discrimination, and it's like something that's so obvious to you, but for other people that don't experience it, they have no idea that it has. So that kind of a line where like, you ever feel like there's something more than what's in front of your eyes? Every damn day. And so he kind of goes, so Detective Baldwin kind of takes him through it. And he says, first day in homicide, pointing to one file, it's a Tuesday. The following Tuesday, today, all young women. And Coleman says, wait, but today's Friday. He's like, I know. He's like, well, what's that mean? And Detective Baldwin says, nothing ever fits perfectly. You're supposed to get 4 inches of rain Sunday morning. You get 2 in the afternoon. The prediction wasn't wrong. It's just not exactly what you expected. And Coleman says, so the pattern breaking proves the pattern? And he says, it's not just the day. Hell, it could have been busy or visiting his folks in Rochester. It's just, when I look at these, I don't know. It just seems like one man's work. And Coleman says, okay, sorry. Coleman says, so you're telling me there's a maniac out there stalking Manhattan, killing on a weekly basis? And Detective Baldwin says, are the New York police saying it? No. Am I? So then Detective Baldwin, okay, this is going to seem like maybe a silly scene. Detective Baldwin takes a bite of his sandwich, right? And he's like, And Coleman's like, what's wrong? And he says, try this. He's like, what? Why? And he's like, trust me. And he gets Coleman to take a bite of his sandwich, and Coleman's eyes get really wide. And he's like, oh my. And Detective Baldwin says, what is that? And Coleman says, well, they salted the tomato. And he's like, what? He's like, I know it doesn't seem like much of a thing, but let me tell you, if you find somewhere that knows to salt the tomato, you better put it in park and stay a while. But there's something kind of larger to this, because it's like, it'll be reinforced on the next page. But basically, Detective Baldwin's like, I got to get back. Can I swing by later and go over these some more? And he goes to leave, but he leaves the files behind. And Coleman says, whoa, I can't have these. And Detective Baldwin says, if I take these, they're going to gather dust in a station house. They're more valuable in your hands than in ours. And so between that and the sandwich, it's like Detective Baldwin is somebody who just kind of sees things as they are. You know what I mean? He doesn't see Coleman as somebody that it would be weird to eat the same piece of a sandwich or not give him these files. He's just somebody who wants to get after, who's trying to do the closest approximation to what's right. And so it doesn't matter who Coleman is. It doesn't matter what race he is. He's just trying to do good. And so even though what he's doing by giving him the files is like, that is really kind of messed up to give somebody, to give a homicide file over to somebody who isn't even a police officer. But by his calculation, they're more valuable in Coleman's hands than just sitting at the station house. So he does it. And it's kind of like driving home the motivation of the character. Just willing to do whatever it is, as long as it's closer to finding the truth or finding justice. And then in the last panel here, you have Coleman's face when he realizes that the police officer just left without paying for his part of the check. And so now he has to pay the whole check. So we cut back to Coleman's apartment, and detective's knocking on the door, and Coleman tells him that he won't be able to come in unless he gives him the 70 cents. He says, that'll be 70 cents. And the detective's like, oh, yeah, sorry. And he's like, mm-hmm. And Detective Baldwin comes in, and he turns around, and he sees that Coleman has turned his apartment, which is he's already turned it into a classroom, but now he's turned it into a kind of makeshift roughshot investigation house, right? So he's got maps on the wall. He's got the blackboard. He's got all these files. He's got notes. And he says, golly. And that is the end of the first act. So we have the pieces put in place. Mo says, removing all the evidence from the police station, eh? Sounds like we found our Hudson River killer. I can't comment on that, but that is very funny. And so that is basically the end of the first act, the end of the first chapter. The pieces have kind of been set in motion. We have a mystery afoot, or we have the beginning of an investigation underway. We have our characters. We've set up a lot with character dynamics and motivations and things like that. Yeah, I'm really proud of it. I'm so glad that you all came out. I really appreciate it. And I wanted to say again, even though I said at the beginning that, oh wait, let me refresh. It's going to be, and okay, so we increased by a backer, but not the number. So that's interesting. But I just want to say, man, you guys in the chat, people that backed the book, people that had me on, it means the world to me. It's not something I take lightly. It's I just backed it as it's shipping in June. Maybe sooner, maybe a little bit later. It's definitely going to be done by June, but it's going to depend on what the publisher. I'm going to be working with a publisher and trying to give all my campaign backers like something a little bit extra. I'm hoping June. It'll probably be done, I guess, like maybe the next month or so. But if you've backed, you're going to be hearing from me a lot. And if you've backed my campaigns before, you're going to be hearing way more from me. You might have to just like block my emails because you're going to get tired of hearing from me with all the updates. But I'm going to be keeping everybody abreast of the situation. Shadowhunk, do you want to? When are you launching? That's coming up soon, right? I'm saying that like he can just say it right back to me. But yeah, tomorrow is going to be there. It is. Hail Shadowhunk. Oh, Arrogant Ape. What's going on, brother? Yeah, so Logan and I have a show tomorrow night, and there is a very real possibility that it is going to be the worst stream ever anybody has put together. Okay, we're doing the top 5. We're going to have Ironverse on, and our top 5 for the week is going to be top 5 songs that pump you up. Okay, so like songs that you just get fucking jacked for. But it's going to be like, when you were a kid, did you ever have a song that you were like, you got all your friends and you were like, you got to hear this, you got to hear this. And then you go to play it for them and they're like, they don't react at all like you would have hoped. We're going to be doing that times 15. So there could be 15 moments where people are just like, that sounds like shit. So strap in, because it might be the biggest train wreck of a stream ever. But once again, I wanted to say thank you to the chat. I want to say thank you to the backers. The link for Noirlem is in the description. It is going to be going in demand unless you want a Zippo. If not, so it's going to be going in demand. Man, check it out. Make sure you get a copy. If you're watching this on the replay, it's going to be there. Sounds like a hot mess, dude. We got the potential. We'll see. I've got 2. No, I think I have 3 metal songs. So if you're a metalhead, there'll be something there for you. But Logan, man, I don't know. That kid hasn't heard anything. Like, he hasn't seen anything. He hasn't heard anything. It's going to be a wild stream. But thank you for coming out. Thank you to the people who come out and watch my train wreck streams. Comment, back the books, push the books. I'm looking forward to not having a campaign going on so I can just be like a normal guy in CG and just hang out and not even have to worry about, like, I'd still like to go on streams, but more like in a social capacity. I can just, tell jokes and crack jokes and shit, not be worrying about trying to get people's eyes on the campaign. But once again, I'm going to call this stream. I hope you all know that how much you're appreciated by me, how what you do makes this possible. So you guys are responsible for the creation of these stories, of this art, and that shit matters in a big way. And words cannot express how much you are appreciated. So I'm going to play the trailer one more time and call it a night. Thank you again for coming out, and I will see you when I see you.